Hello and welcome to episode 65 of the Ohio Huntsman podcast, and we are in the rut. Hopefully you guys have been out hunting, and hopefully you've been seeing some exciting action. Mark Stuckbauer he's the guy that we did the episode last week with. He sent us a video of crazy chasing, about got run over, and managed to get it on video, and so hopefully you guys are having some similar success and are getting into some deer. This episode is going to be about our bow hunt weekend. We went down the first weekend of December. I am ending the year already. The first weekend of November down to our cabin in southeast Ohio, down Washington County. And if you saw the social posts, I was able to harvest a buck while we were down there, and so that's what this episode is about. This is about that weekend, what we saw, exciting, interesting things. As you'll hear in this episode, there was a little bit of a tree stand saga with Jeff, and we talk about my tree stand setup. So if you're interested in that, I use the Hawk Helium stand and sticks. If you want to see what we're talking about, I'll put a link to that in the show notes so you guys can see if you're not familiar with the Hawk Helium stuff, and that way you guys can check that out. And we just got back from our last day you've heard us talk, Jacob got drawn for a parks hunt, and so this was our last day that we were allowed in there and had to pull all the gear and everything like that. So we've been spending plenty of time in the woods, been having seeing some deer. Like I said, I was able to harvest my buck for 2019 while we were down at the cabin, and it's been a good season so far. So before we get into the episode, I want to talk about our sponsor, Monster Whitetail Grub. And you've heard me talk, they are an Ohio deer feed company, and they make a great product. If you use feed as an attractant or as a way to supplement your deer, however you want to use it, they've got what you need, and it's all Ohio ingredients, which I really like. So even the packaging, he tries to get all the packaging, the buckets and everything from Ohio. So it's a good company, it's a good product. We've had really good success with it. They've got their sort of signature feed. It's a high protein feed. It's got mineral mixed in, and then they've also got flavored corn options and straight mineral. So whatever you need, they've got it. So there'll be a link in the show notes on how to get in touch with them and order some product. And with that, let's get into the episode about our bow hunt weekend down at the cabin. Welcome to the Ohio Huntsman podcast, where three brothers, Jason, Jacob, and Jeff, discuss all things hunting in Ohio. Our goal is to be your source for accurate and reliable hunting news and conservation issues in the great state of Ohio, as well as some fun and interesting conversations along the way. This is the Ohio Huntsman Podcast.
Are you listening?
All right, so today on the show, we are going to talk about our bow hunting weekend down at the cabin, and basically just talk about how that went, what we were seeing, and just, I guess, tell the stories of the weekend. So, how do we want to run this, you guys? Do you want to go day by day, or do each of us want to run through sort of our weekend, and then we'll move on to the next one?
I think each of us maybe just run through the highlights of our weekend.
Yeah.
Because day by day, I mean, I don't have anything interesting that happened every day, so.
Yeah. All right. That works for me. So, who wants to start? Jake, you want to start? Well, you and I got down there Friday. So this was...
we got down Thursday night.
True story. Correction. Thursday night, which was Halloween, the 31st.
Correct. Yes.
So we all got down there after legal shooting light, so we didn't hunt the 31st. Friday, November 1st was the first day we hunted.
Yeah.
So, Jake, why don't you kind of run through your highlights, I guess.
Okay. Friday would have been the first. I went up to a piece of private ground down there. It's one of the locals that lets us hunt his property. It's where I'd done a little bit of my gun hunting last year, and I found a spot up there that I figured, based on sign I saw last year, because we don't get down there much, so I didn't have any recent information really. I was just going off last year and kind of the stuff I saw during gun season. A good spot where I thought would be a good spot to hang and hunt with the climber. It's kind of a transition area where a bunch of like mowed paths kind of come together, and I had seen a good amount of buck sign up there in terms of scrapes and rubs and that kind of stuff the previous year. So and because it was kind of mowed paths, I thought I'd be able to get in relatively quietly to hang up my stand. Unfortunately, those paths have not been maintained from last year to this year. So what I thought were going to be mowed paths and easy access were overgrown and full of briars. So the quiet, quick, and easy access was non-existent. I made a whole bunch of noise going in the woods. Hanging my stand, it was not a stealthy entrance, that's for sure. So I hung up, and it was well after shooting light by the time I got up there and hung my stand, because unfortunately, I guess, the guy with the truck is always the last one in the woods. So I had to drop everybody else off on the way to my spot, which is fine. Didn't get as early of a start as I would have liked, but that's okay. Got in the woods, picked my tree out, got up in my tree, and basically not a whole lot of activity at what you would say first light, because I wasn't really even in the tree at first light. But then I think it was probably about 9 o'clock. Small doe came by out of range. So I just watched that kind of happen and was thinking, well, that's kind of a bummer. Hopefully that's not the hot trail and they're not all taking that path, because that's not within range. But then maybe half hour, 45 minutes later, I decided to hit the rattling antlers a little bit just to see if I could drum something up. And no more than 5 minutes later, a doe came in. Whether that was coming into the rattling or it just so happened that I rattled and she was already on her way in and didn't care about me rattling, I don't know, because I didn't see her. I was blind rattling. So I don't know. She came straight in down a path directly towards me, and then started to turn to jump a fence off of the property that I was allowed to hunt. So unfortunately, I kind of rushed the shot a little bit further than I had planned on, and also I rushed it. So I did not put a good shot on her. Never did recover the deer. I don't think it was a lethal shot based on looking at the arrow. Looked like it was not in the vitals. It was kind of in a no man's land. Came out pretty fatty. Got a decent amount of blood initially, but then I tracked her a good long ways for a long time, and it was down to pin drops of blood. So the blood had basically sealed off. I'm assuming the fat had plugged it off, and I'm imagining that deer probably lived. It's hard to say because I don't know where exactly I hit her.
Well, and you hunted in and around there a lot the rest of the weekend and never found any more blood, never found a deer.
Yeah, I found one more speck of blood, and it was totally just a random thing. And I can't even say it was from that deer. I'm assuming it was, but who knows? There are other guys who hunt other property down there. But there was a gate that had a hole basically next to it in the barbed wire where the deer go through the fence there. And right there was a tiny speck. I mean, I'm talking smaller than the tip of your pinky, which is what the blood had gotten down to by the time I lost blood.
Like a match head drop.
Yeah, just a tiny little drop. Yeah. The next day, I had found that on a leaf going through that fence gap where the barbed wire. The middle strand is missing basically, so they go through between the top and bottom strand of barbed wire. I'm assuming it was that same deer, but there's no way to know for sure. And that was probably at least 150 to 200 yards from where I had lost blood.
Okay.
So I'm assuming that deer survived. I wish I knew better where I hit her just to know. But yeah, I hunted in and around there. I walked all over. I mean, if she was lethally hit and she was going uphill from where, the blood trail started going uphill, which typically they say at least a mortally wounded deer doesn't typically go uphill. But yeah, I'm hoping that she survived. I think she did based on the blood and based on the way the arrow looked. Live and learn. Yeah. Like I said, I rushed the shot and it was a little bit further than I'm comfortable with. Well, basically not comfortable with, I guess, but then my bow shoots. My bow is pretty loud, so I have it sighted in at like 10, 20, 30 yards. I don't have anything past 30 yards because it's too loud. So if I'm shooting a deer past 30 yards, they react to the bow before the arrow gets to them. So it's just not ethical in my mind to take those shots because I don't know what the deer is going to do by the time the arrow gets there. So it was probably a 40-yard shot. And so it was one of those things where I had to make a quick game time decision of how much, below my 30-yard pin, so to speak, that I was going to aim and if I thought the deer was going to drop or not drop. So I think I aimed a little. I think I was expecting the deer to drop a little bit and it didn't. So I think I grazed basically the stomach or below the vitals in the chest area is where I'm thinking I hit. Kind of that brisket area below the lungs.
So if you had to do it again, would you take the shot or would you compensate differently?
If I had to do it again, I probably would have waited to see if the deer was going to come closer. I mean, she had turned to go over the fence private, but who knows? Once I didn't know what the fence looked like there. It really wasn't a fence crossing. Now that, hindsight, once I got down and looked, I don't think she would have jumped the fence there. It was not a clear spot where deer cross. I feel like she would have continued down the trail closer to me and then maybe cross the fence or maybe not cross the fence. She might have just been turning that way to go get a bite from the plant that was over there. Who knows?
Yeah.
It was just one of those things where she was coming in straight on and then she turned and gave me basically broadside and took a few steps towards that fence. And, it was unfortunately the property line of where I can and can't hunt. So,
yeah.
So
that was Friday, right? Basically, that was all.
Yeah, that was Friday morning that happened, but I'm not one to leave a deer trail in the woods, so I tracked and trailed that deer until early afternoon. I tracked it from the time I got down from the stand, 11:30 till 2, 1:30, something like that, and then I came back in the afternoon to try to pick up the trail and keep looking, just because the trail started getting thinner, so I figured deer's not dead. I don't want to push it. So I came back and tracked it for another 2 hours into the early evening, and then at that point called it off and did an evening sit, but did not see anything on my evening sit Friday.
Okay. So anything of note on Saturday then?
No. I don't think I saw a tail on Saturday, to be honest with you. I don't think I saw a single deer.
Okay. And then that big buck you saw while driving, was that Saturday or was that?
That was Saturday coming back for lunch. So yeah, I guess that is of note, sort of, not really with hunting per se, because you don't hunt from the car, but big buck's kind of cool. I was driving, I went Saturday morning, back out to that same property I hunted Friday. I hunted the same general ridge, just I approached it from the other side, which is that gate. I came through the back side of the property essentially, and nothing, didn't see or hear a thing. So then I was coming back for lunch to regroup and then head to a different place Saturday evening. And off the side of the road, I saw a really nice deer. I don't know in terms of, inches of antler or whatever, but it was certainly a mature buck. It was on private property we don't necessarily have permission on. We're friendly with the property owner. If we really wanted to hunt his property, we probably could knock on his door and he would say yes, but we don't technically have permission to be on his property. Some other guys hunt it, I think, but I stopped it. That buck stood there. I allowed me to stop the truck and actually back up a little bit to just kind of wow at him a little bit.
Well, and I think that's the highlight for me, right? Is that it's that time of year when, a mature buck will stand there within sight of the road and let you stop and back up.
Right.
Normally that don't happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, the first thought that went through my head was he better figure it out, because in a couple weeks, if he stands there like that, he's going to be in trouble.
Yeah.
Because, he was off the road. It was every bit of 50 yards, 60 yards probably off the road, and it was through brush. You couldn't have shot him where he was standing with a bow anyhow. But if he lets people get that close to him during gun season, he's going to have trouble.
Yeah.
But he was a nice deer.
So then I left Sunday morning. I didn't hunt Sunday, but you guys hunted the morning Sunday.
Yeah, Sunday morning I hunted actually the old oak flat that, if you listen to the episode we did with our dad, the old oak flat that he's always hunted growing up. That was Dad's spot, and where he would take us for our first hunts, essentially, kind of that same general area where I shot my first deer. I went up to that old oak flat, and
I think that's episode 63, I think. It's called Stories with the Old Man, if you're interested.
I went up to that old oak flat just because throughout the weekend we had kind of determined that, yes, the quote-unquote rut was starting and on, which Jason will get into a little more. His story relates more to some typical rut behavior, but the deer down there were definitely feeding on the oaks, the oak trees. Specifically the trees that were producing. There wasn't a ton of the typical oak trees down there that were producing. So the ones that were, that's where the deer were. So I went up to that oak flat. And again, story of my weekend, I didn't get in as early as I wanted. So it was gray light, breaking, dawn, so to speak, shooting light when I was kind of getting to where I wanted to go. And when I crested the hill up into the oak flat, I busted 4 or 5 deer out of that oak flat. So then I proceeded on to where I wanted to set my stand up, and sat there the morning for the most part. We had planned to only hunt till like 10:30 or 11 and then head home. And then when I was climbing down out of my tree, I actually busted another deer that was down below me. Again, not that I could see while I was in my stand, but if I would have hunted another half hour, it may have worked its way up to me. Who knows? But it busted out. I heard it and then saw its tail. It was probably, 75 yards away down through a bunch of brush, but so I got into the deer Sunday morning. Nothing.
That was a doe?
The best I could tell.
Okay.
I don't think none of them were, the ones up on the oak flat. Like I said, it was gray light. It was just getting to be shooting light. The best I could tell, they were all does. If they were bucks, they were not big bucks. but I couldn't, I crested that hill and they busted out. So I saw mostly just their back ends, but I don't think any were bucks, but I don't know. It's hard to say.
Well, and that's, that midday movement, right? That midday activity, that's kind of indicative of the rut also, right? So,
right. Yeah. Yeah. So I got into the deer Sunday morning. It's one of those things that's hunting, I guess. If I could have hunted all day Sunday, I feel like I would have had a good chance of putting one on the ground, but that's the way it is. Had family and other obligations to get back to. So
yep.
That's that. That was my rut bow weekend down at the cabin. Unsuccessful for me. I didn't end up putting anything in the freezer, but I'll plan on trying to get out this weekend, which is what more people would probably consider the quote unquote prime weekend of rut. So I'm going to hunt here locally and see what I can do.
All right. So Jeff, do you want to go next? Or actually, I think I'll go next. I think that makes more sense. So like Jacob said, got down there Thursday night, got up and hunted first thing Friday morning. So same thing as Jacob. We hadn't done a ton of pre-scouting or any pre-scouting. I was just going up to a spot that I'm somewhat familiar with and was going to set up where it looked good. So I kind of intentionally took my time getting up there because I wanted a little bit of that gray light, that first morning light, to kind of have some idea of where I was setting up. I didn't want to set up in the pitch dark and then it get light and go, oh, this wasn't a good spot. So because I was going way up on top of this ridge. So I got up there and basically found a good spot kind of on this point where it's kind of the highest spot in that area, right? And so I came down off of that point a little bit, figuring the deer are going to kind of come along this ridge and funnel around this point. And so I thought it was a good kind of travel corridor, and I knew there was some thicker bedding down out the ridge a little farther and some thicker bedding down below me. And so I thought, well, this is a good kind of rut travel corridor funnel area. So we've talked in the past. Jacob uses a climber. I use a lightweight aluminum stand with sticks, trees, climbing or tree sticks, whatever you want to call them. The Hawk Helium sticks is what I use. And so I got all that set up, got in my stand, and you've heard us talk before. We don't get great cell service down there, but if you're up on top of the ridge, you can get service. So I was up there, and this is important to the story. I was up there responding to Facebook comments on Ohio Huntsman and doing that kind of stuff, catching up on what's going on social since I went out of cell service the night before. And it was probably 9 o'clock, and I was taking I think I made a post to social that, while I was sitting there, asking who all was out hunting. If you guys, you probably saw that, or you may have seen that on Facebook and Instagram. And looked up, and to my left, there's a deer. There's a buck. And it's a pretty nice buck. And he's already in bow range. He's probably 35 yards. He's facing me, kind of coming up this ridge, up to this point, and he did exactly what I thought he was going to do. He got up to kind of where it flattened out a little bit, and then started to skirt around the edge instead of continuing on up to the highest peak of this point. And I wasn't ready. I was fooling around on my phone. So I'm panicking, scrambling, trying to get my phone down in my pocket, trying to get my bow. He's got no clue I'm there. He's coming up the ridge or coming up this point, and he turns to, he's off to, let's do the clock metaphor, right? So when I initially see him, as I'm sitting in my stand, he is at my, let's say 10 o'clock and 10, 11 o'clock. Let's call it 10:30. So he's somewhere between my 10, 11 o'clock, right? If 12 o'clock is straightforward, it's while I'm sitting in my stand. He comes up. Now he's starting to swing around me, 9, 8, 7, that way around the clock. And I've got a window at like the 8, 9 o'clock area, but I'm still trying to get my bow down at that point. He's walking right through it. And so I miss that opportunity. I get my bow, and he basically comes right under my stand. Like I could have jumped out of my stand onto his back, and I didn't want to take that shot, right? I'm shooting straight down on him. I didn't want to one lung him or anything. And he's still walking, still got no clue I'm there. He gets, so now he's twisted me around, and he's not quite at my 6 o'clock yet. He's probably at my 7 o'clock, and he's got past me now, basically. And I've got another window. I've got my bow at this point, but he's never stopped, basically. He's walking. This is all, I'm telling this over a course of minutes, but this is all seconds, right? This whole encounter probably lasted 60 seconds. So he's walking. He comes out to where I'm a little more comfortable with the shot, and I try to stop him. Now he's close, right? He's 10 yards or something. And so I go, map, and he runs. It scared him. I didn't do it loud, but apparently it startled him. He bounds off to, again, probably he's in that 35, 40-yard range. There's some twigs and stuff in the way, and now he's completely behind me, and I can't shoot behind me. I'm wrapped around the tree. If I shoot, my crossbow limb is going to hit the tree. I just can't shoot. So he stops, looks around, and continues on out of my life, basically. And so I'm pretty bummed at this point. And because, like I said, it was a nice buck, and I screwed up. I wasn't ready. So sitting there, and like I said, that whole encounter, probably 60 seconds. It happened fast. He was there. He was gone. So I'm coming down off of that high, and I hear footsteps. And again, I look off to my left, and there's another buck coming up the hill. Not the exact same way he came, but sort of the same general direction. And so I see him from a little farther out, but same thing. He's cruising. He's not taking his time, being real cautious. He's cruising. So I get my bow. I find him in the scope, and as I find him in the scope, I happen to notice that as he's coming up the hill, his tongue's hanging out, like he's been running around all night, all morning, or whatever. And so he gets almost to where I bleeded at the first buck, in that same general area, and same thing. He's not wanting to stop. So I give it, instead of, because I got burned on the map, so I just start kind of clicking, like, and I had to get pretty loud with it. But as I ramped the volume up, he did finally stop and look, and that's when I shot. And the sound was good. Like, I heard that pop when it hit him. I was a little afraid that it was back. because same thing, you know, like I don't want this deer to walk out of my life. He stopped, I shot, and he runs off. I heard that pop, and he runs off, and probably to I would say about 60 yards, and I thought I could, you know, because there's still a fair amount of leaves on the tree. I thought I saw him stop over there, and I was hoping to see him tip over, and I didn't hear him crash, and so I started getting nervous about the hit. So I waited an hour, couldn't take it anymore, climbed down, I'm going to look at the arrow. Find the arrow, and it's got good blood on it. There's not really any bubbles in the blood, which had me a little nervous, but I had good red blood. So, and I got plenty of blood to track. So I start real slowly following the trail. As I'm finding blood on the ground, I am finding blood in the blood on the ground. There was no, I'm finding blood on the blood. I'm finding bubbles in the blood on the ground. So again, real slow, tracking him. I've got good blood to follow, and I've got bubbles in it. So I know I've at least hit one lung, and he's bleeding good. I get to this big patch of blood, and I think that's where he stopped initially, when I saw him run off and he stopped. So I'm in, and it's, you know, I don't know. It's a good sized area of blood. There's no sign that he laid down there, but he stood there and bled for a minute or two. And I'm looking around, hoping to see a deer laying there, and I don't. And so, you know, I had been texting Jacob and Jeff through this, and basically because he wasn't laying there or within sight, I got nervous again. And Jeff suggested that I kind of back, because, you know, we've got some terrain to work with, back out and try to circle around uphill and see if you can, you know, I had my binoculars with me, see if you could get eyes on him that way. So I did, but I didn't want to go too far and risk bumping him. So I did a quick search that way and figured, you know what, at this point, you know, it was cool that day. I'm going to back out. I'm going to go get lunch and come back later. So I'm thankful I did, because we came back, we picked up the trail, and he was probably another 40, 50 yards from where I left. Whether he was dead when I tracked him the first time, you know, after the initial hour, I don't know. But basically, you know, as we were gutting him, it was, I'm pretty sure it was one lung and definitely liver. Dad saved the liver. Dad went back up there to track with me, and he pulled the liver out, and it had a perfect broadhead hole right through it. So we found him. That's the buck that, if you guys follow us on social, that's the buck that posted about. And yeah, so it was a success. I got my buck for 2019, and he's actually only a 5-point, but he's not like a yearling 5-point, right? He's got some width to him, and so it was a pretty cool deer. It wasn't as big as the first one that came by, but I was happy with him.
Yeah, and he's only a 5-point because he doesn't have brow tines, which is kind of odd.
Yeah.
But the deer has 0 brow tines.
Yeah. So we're gonna put some pictures together and put it in the post for this episode. So if you go to ohiohuntsman.com and look at the article for this post, there'll be pictures. You know, maybe I'll put because I took a picture of the liver with the broadhead hole in it, so maybe I'll put that picture in there, and of course pictures of my buck and some other pictures we took over the weekend, so that we haven't shared on social yet. So if you're interested, check those out. And so basically that was the rest of my Friday, right? Tracking this deer, dragging him out, getting him processed. That was Friday. Saturday for me, went up to an area I've never been before, and I got into some deer. I jumped 2 deer when I walked in, and the one doe, they were does. The one doe, I'm not sure if she kind of circled around and stayed in the area, or it was a different deer or what, but as I was trying to find a spot to sit, I got behind this down tree. She was within range, but through brush, because I'm on the ground at this point, because I left my stand up there for, because I thought it's a good rut spot. I left my stand up there for somebody else to hunt. And so I'm hunting on the ground Saturday. So I fooled around with her for a while. Didn't end up getting a shot. And I think the wind swirled at one point. It was probably a half hour or something that her and I kind of fooled around. And I'm trying to get a shot, trying to find a hole, that kind of thing, as she's milling around. And I think she went over a roll in the hill and laid down. And then as the morning kind of warmed up, I think the wind shifted, and I think she got a nose full of me, and because all of a sudden I had a deer blowing at me. And then things after that quieted down pretty significantly until, I don't know, I wish I remember what time it was, but it was again probably in that 9-10 o'clock time frame, and all of a sudden, it's a stampede. There's a bunch of deer running toward me. I can't see them initially, but they came over that same roll in the hillside where that first doe went, and it ended up being 3 does that were being pushed around by a small buck. And so I, was trying to get a shot at one of the does, but one of them pops out, then it's out of the lane. I'm trying to get it, so I'm moving around a lot, and with all the deer there, they saw me and basically spun around and went back the way they had come. And that was pretty much it for me. I hunted, like I said, I didn't hunt Sunday morning. I hunted Saturday night. I went up and got my stand, took that down, and hunted from the ground again, and didn't see anything. And so that was kind of my weekend. So my highlight was Friday morning when I shot my buck. So, and that brings us to Jeff's story here. So, all right, I want to pause here for a quick second and talk about our sponsor, Mastin's Deer Sense. So we were using Mastin Sense all weekend while we were down at the cabin, and I should have had Jeff record this commercial because he was using you've heard me talk about their double scent stacker. If you haven't heard me talk about it, you can put a deer scented candle, or they've got apple candle or things like that, scented candles, but they've got scented candles that are deer scent, so full estrus candle or a buck reaper candle, whatever you like. And then on top of this, basically it's an aluminum cylinder, you've got a tray where you can put liquid scent, and basically that allows you to layer scents. So you can have 2 scents out at once. The candle heats the scent to make it more lifelike, more realistic. And Jeff used it and really liked it this weekend. So this was the first time that we've really played around with that. And it's cool. It works. And we were using the scents this weekend. It was good. It was good to have that stuff, and we really enjoy having them as a sponsor. They sponsored the show, and that allows us to continue to make these episodes. So if you're interested in scent, if you want to try some of that stuff out, there'll be a link in the show notes on how to go to their website, mastinsdeerscents.com, and you can order right from their website and have it shipped to your house. And with that, let's get back into the episode. Jeff came down Friday evening.
I came
dark,
down,
right?
Yeah, Friday after work. I couldn't get Friday off work, so I came down Friday after work. Jason had already shot his deer, left the tree stand in the tree, so I planned to hunt that Saturday. And I'm not much of a tree stand hunter. I typically hunt out of ladder stands or like permanent hang-on stands. So Jason's telling me about his stand and where it's at, and that you're probably going to need a lineman's rope. Well, I don't have a lineman's rope. I typically climb the stand, then hook my harness to the tree. So I'm not safe climbing the tree. I just climb the ladder or whatever and then secure myself to the tree. Really should get a lineman's rope, but
You really should.
yeah.
I hope you get a lot of flack for this.
Yeah.
You guys should send messages to Jeff and tell him that he needs to get a lineman's belt.
Well, can you use a line? I guess you could climb a ladder stand.
I don't know about a ladder stand. Yeah, I've not really spent a lot of time in a ladder stand. I don't.
Okay. Well, because I've only ever hunted out of a different kind of tree stand, like, I don't know, 4 or 5 times in my life.
I think a ladder stand, the best way to be connected from the ground would probably be to one of those lifelines. Like when you put the stand up, put one of those lifelines in the tree.
Yeah. So Jason says you're going to need a lineman's rope. So I ask him for one of his because he's going to be hunting on the ground. So I show up to Jason's stand, and I'm trying to find a tree in the woods, kind of. He kind of told me where it was at, and I was very familiar with the area. So I found it relatively easily, and I get all set up, and I start climbing the stand, and I put the lineman's rope on, and I start climbing the stand, and realize...
And I told him before, like, there's a couple limbs you're going to have to deal with, and once you get up near hunting height, the tree splits, and the stand is on the left split, and so you're going to have to deal with that, and figured, he was squared away.
Yeah. So I start climbing this stand, and it was very different than any stand I've ever climbed before. Those, what you call them, tree sticks?
Yeah. The Hawk Helium tree sticks, and I've added nylon tubular webbing aiders. So basically a loop on the bottom of each one of my sticks. So I can essentially get the height of 4 sticks with 3 sticks, basically.
Yeah, so it was very different.
Yeah, it adds some like you said, different. It's not your standard hang a stand in preseason with one of those steel ladders that's, very stable and everything like that.
Yeah. And like the aiders, it's kind of like climbing it's one step of a rope ladder, kind of.
Right.
Like it swings around and also, yeah, the sticks, they're using your weight to kind of dig into the tree. So if don't have any weight on it, they'll move around. So it was very different. Well, so I get up to this first branch, and then I realize, okay, I'm going to have to take the lineman's rope off and go around the branch. And I successfully do that. That's no big deal, really. I get up a little bit more and realize, oh, the lineman's rope's caught on something again. Like it's caught. Like I don't know what's going on. So I'm, trying to kind of look around the tree to find what it's caught on. Realize there's a branch, directly on the opposite side of the tree. So I have to take the lineman's rope off again. And at this point, I'm like, all right, I might just go back down and hunt from the ground because, taking this lineman's rope off and back on, this many times is starting to make me nervous.
Because you're on the second stick by this point, right?
Yeah, I'm on the second of 3, right? There's 3?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm on the second one, so I'm, I don't know, halfway up, let's say. I mean, it's close enough to halfway up. But I figure, all right, I'm not too high. I'm going to give it a shot to get around this stick, take the line, unhook it and try to throw it over. And it works out. I'm able to do it. And so I hook back up and I start going back up the tree. And now it's the point where the tree splits, I believe. And right where the tree splits is also where you're going from one set of steps to the other. So I need to basically get to the next set of steps with using the aider and unhook the lineman's rope and rehook it so it's just on one of the trees. So I am trying to figure this out, and then I get to the point where it's like, all right, so I'm gonna step up to the aider, and then I'm gonna have to unhook, like, because it's the lineman's rope's gonna be holding me down then, or loosen it up. So I loosened it up a bunch, and then I step up. So I need to take the lineman's rope off again, hook it on one tree, and then I get to this point and realize, okay, this is way dangerous. Like, basically, I'm like, I want to go down. But I realize I'm closer up than I am down. So I might as well just go up. So I get up to where the stand is now, and now I need to unhook the lineman's rope to get it around the platform of the stand so I can climb into the stand.
Yeah, and you're on, this is the third stick, the top stick at this point.
Right. And the lineman's rope is at the bottom, the base of the stand. So I hook my harness above the base but below the seat of the stand to the tree and I hook that all up. I take the lineman's rope off and I climb onto the base of the stand, and then I needed to hook my lineman's rope up again and unhook the harness and put the harness where it should be on the tree.
How are you hooking the harness up? What do you mean? You said I've got to hook the harness between because a stand has the two claws, right, where the seat goes against the tree and where the platform goes against the tree. So you're saying you've got to hook your harness between the platform and the seat.
Yeah.
And then you disconnect the lineman's belt.
Yeah. So I put the strap around the tree and tighten my harness to the tree.
So that's
including
like
the stand,
a seat belt strap.
Yes, like a seatbelt strap. Yeah, so I hooked that there, and then I got onto the stand, put the lineman's rope back on, unhook the seatbelt strap, and put it up where it's supposed to be. Okay.
So you finally make it into the stand after all of this.
Yeah, and I text and say, someone's probably going to have to come get me out of the stand because I don't think I can get back down.
And so, because you texted a couple times throughout the day, like, this is freaking crazy. Like you said, somebody's going to have to come get me out of this thing. And the whole time, I'm like, yeah, you had some branches to go around, but I didn't think it was that big of a deal. Well, what ended up happening is I thought, I told him, bring your harness, you can use my stand. I assumed he had a lineman's rope. And so I was giving him a second lineman's rope. Because when I climb the tree, I always have two lineman's ropes with me so I can work around branches. So I thought I was giving him a second lineman's rope to deal with the branches and the split in the tree, and it's no big deal, right? So when I climb, I'm never disconnected. I disconnect one lineman's rope while I'm still connected to the first one, put it above the branch, now disconnect the lower lineman's belt, and continue to climb. I'm never disconnected, and so it's not a big deal. So when he comes back from, you manage to get down out of this tree, right?
Yeah, just as much difficulty as I don't know, just as much. The difficult part of getting down was reaching down, trying to find the cheater.
The aider.
The aider, yeah. Reaching down, trying to find that with your foot. Was difficult, but that was manageable.
Yeah. So he gets back to the cabin, and he's like, "You're freaking crazy. I'm never hunting out of that thing again." And that's when it becomes clear that, or maybe it was even later that evening. At some point, it.
I think I said, it would have been a whole lot better if I had two of those linemen's ropes. Like
That's what it was.
That would have made everything safe.
Yeah, and I said, "Hang on a second. You climbed that stand with one lineman's rope?" You're like, "Yeah, that's what I'm saying. This is crazy." I'm like, "Oh yeah, that was way dangerous, dude." Yeah, because I didn't realize. Yeah, there was a miscommunication somewhere. I thought I was giving you a second lineman's rope. Everything was going to be all good, no problem. And you climbed that stand with one lineman's rope, which was way dangerous. That was definitely a two lineman's rope climb.
Yeah. So that's my excitement. I did see some does in that stand, but they came through quickly and came in from behind me, so I didn't see them till they were basically in range, and then they immediately kind of were in range. They never stopped and just popped right over the ridge. So moral of the story there is get a lineman's rope. No,
get
two, maybe three, just to be safe.
Yeah.
And know what you're getting into when you're going to climb someone else's stand.
Yes.
So
yeah.
That was...
Yeah, I felt bad after it became evident that you climbed that with one. I was like, because I was thinking, dude, it wasn't that big of a deal, right? Just disconnect one lineman's belt and go, and but when it became evident that you climbed it with one, I was like, I felt bad at that point. I was like, oh, holy crap, man. Yeah, that was, I understand why you were texting saying somebody's going to need to come get me down out of this thing. Cause that was way scary.
Yeah. By the way, no one did come and get me down out of
it.
I got down by myself. But I did text and said, I'm getting down out of this. I will text you when I'm on the ground.
Well, and that goes back to not getting cell service down there, because I didn't get any of those text messages until I went back up to hunt in the evening. And then I got the text messages. It's like, well, a lot of good that would have done us,
Yeah. But so then came Sunday, because I didn't have any real luck hunting from the ground Saturday night. So then came Sunday, and Sunday I went and hunted in an area where another guy down there had been hunting and seeing deer, just not having any luck connecting on one. So around probably 8 o'clock, and this is now the first day with daylight savings time, so 8 o'clock would have been 9 o'clock the day before.
Right.
I see some, and well, I better explain the spot. The spot is kind of like a pinch point where the deer are crossing from one hollow to another. So it's all the way up on the ridge top, and the deer are crossing from one big hollow bowl to another. And I'm set up next to a log to, basically block my whole body. All you can see of me is basically shoulders and up, and I have my bow set on top.
Right.
So I see some deer all the way at the other side of the bowl, and they're working their way around. And over the next 30 minutes, they work their way around, and it becomes evident that they're not going to come up over the ridge. They're going to come around that other hollow and walk on a bench down below me. And I can't really see that bench from a seated position. So I wait until the deer are on that bench down there, and I roll up onto my knees. So then I can see that bench and see that there's only really one spot where those deer are going to come into range. The bench kind of pinches in at a spot and becomes a lot smaller and comes a lot closer to me, and then it goes right back out, and they're walking right at the very edge, the outer edge. So I wait. It was two does. It was a fawn and a doe fawn and a doe, and I let the doe fawn go through, and the doe's following it, and I get the doe to stop right at that pinch point, and
How'd you stop her?
I did a little like meh, and
Yeah.
she stopped. So I got her to stop right at that pinch point.
How far is she at this point, did you say?
I thought she was at 30 yards.
Okay.
Maybe 35. So I put my 30-yard pin on her and take the shot. And I can hear like clean miss, I don't hear any connection. But both deer run back the way they came from, back into the back of this bowl. And they probably only run 50 yards away. So I'm sitting here trying to figure out how I missed, what went wrong. It's like clearly I went low, so maybe I misjudged the distance.
Right.
So, and they're over in the back of the bowl, just kind of hanging out over there, trying to figure out what had happened.
Okay.
And I noticed that the one is licking its leg. So I'm wondering, like, did I hit its leg? And I'm like, no, there's no way, because I wasn't aiming at the front shoulder. I was aiming, back further for like a double lung shot. So I'm like, no, there's no way. Well, then it starts to walk, and I realize, no, this thing's got a limp. Well, it mills around on that back bowl for another half hour probably. And then they finally kind of decide, okay, it's safe to go back the way we were going. Like, we don't know what that was, but we think we're safe. So the fawn walks through real nice and slow. The
Basically
doe,
the same lane they came through the first time?
Exact same trail.
Okay.
The doe comes, well, when it gets close to where I shot at it, it kind of speeds up to like a trot. So it gets past that little pinch point. So now I'm thinking it's at 40 yards, but I'm like, well, I thought 30 yards, I thought it was 30 yards at the pinch point. So at 40 yards, now it's 40 yards and it's wounded. So I gotta, I owe it to the animal to try to shoot again.
Right.
So I get it to stop, and I put my 50-yard pin on the deer and sail way over its back. Like the deer was probably at 30 yards still at that point. So I'm thinking with my first shot, I hit a stick or something that sent my arrow low.
Oh, okay.
Because I send this arrow 1.5 feet over this bolt, 1.5 feet over the deer's back.
Right.
And send it down into the hollow. I mean, just launch it. This arrow probably went all the way, 100 yards or more down into this hollow.
Right.
It was a long, long way. But so then they run off, and I go look for my arrows. And well, let me back up. I could, when the deer got close, I could see where I had hit it with the arrow. And I ended up hitting it just above the knee and back. So I cut the back of its leg.
Oh, okay.
So it was a pretty minor wound. So I knew that
It was
deer.
still walking on that leg and everything, just kind of limping.
Well, at this point, it had stopped limping.
Okay.
It had got its bearings back, and it had figured out that its leg was fine, basically.
Okay. Yeah.
It was no longer limping on that leg. It was just walking normal. But you could see that it had bled from a spot on the back of its leg. So I go down to see if I can find my arrows. I find the first arrow, no problem. It was shot low, so it was right in the edge of that bench there. It was easy to find. The second arrow I had launched down into the hollow. So I start walking down there, and I'm frustrated with myself because it's like, I really screwed things up here. And I'm walking down there, and I'm looking around. Well, I get to the back of this, kind of down in the bottom towards the back of this bowl, and there's some fingers that kind of come down, drainages that come down, and there's 3 of them. There's the first one, there's one in the middle, and there's one at the other side of these little drainages.
Right.
So I get down there, and I'm looking around, and for some reason, I heard a squirrel. So I look up at the other hillside, the other side of this bowl, and I see something that kind of looks like a deer, but I'm thinking, no, it's not a deer. I thought, no, that's too big to be a deer, and it's too close. Like, if that was a deer, it's probably 75 yards away. I was like, if that was a deer, it would have already heard me come down the hill and ran off. So I take another step, and then I think, I better take another look at that and just make sure. So I look over there again and realize, well, what I thought was a deer is no longer where it was. So now I'm standing there looking around like, well, where was it? What did I see?
Yeah.
Well, then I realize, oh yeah, that is a deer. Like, it's a deer over there walking around, eating acorns off the other hillside. And I realized that's a big deer. I couldn't yet tell if it was a buck or a doe, but I knew it was a big deer. So I get down, like I'm kind of sit down on one of those fingers, at the first finger, and start looking at this deer. And I am looking, and I realize that's a buck, and it's a pretty decent buck. So now I'm kind of trying to devise a plan to get this buck to either come towards me, or our dad is hunting on that hillside, like towards the road. So it's like, I either want this thing to come towards me or go out the hillside towards him.
Right.
So I sit there and I'm watching this thing at 75 yards, and it's just kind of walking back and forth on that hillside, just cleaning up acorns. And eventually it kind of works its way to about 50 yards, and this has probably been 30 to 45 minutes. So I decide, and another detail is I left my book bag where I found my first arrow. My book bag with all my calls and my knife, my drag rope, all that. I left it there to kind of mark where the arrow was shot from, so I could see in the bottom of the hollow, like, where I needed to line up with.
Right.
So I have no calls. I have none of that. So I decide, well, I'm going to try to burp grunt at this thing. I'm going to try to burp and make it sound like a grunt and see what happens. I got nothing to lose. So, eating breakfast down at the cabin, it's usually pretty hearty breakfast. So there's always a burp you can work up. So I do it once, and I think the buck hears it. Like, he picks up his head and kind of looks back and forth, and it's like, maybe that worked. So I, wait a few minutes and work up another burp, and I try it again. And that time, he definitely hears it. He turns his head and looks over, and then now he's no longer really interested in eating acorns. He wants to find out what made that noise. So he starts coming along the back of that bowl towards me. And I can see where the deer trail is, and the deer trail is going to come to that first finger on the other side, go down into the little drainage, pop back up into the middle finger, and at that middle finger, it kind of turns and goes uphill and like up around me. So he gets to that first finger and he goes down in it.
And how far is he at the first finger, roughly?
The first finger's probably 40 yards, 45 yards maybe.
Okay, so he's close.
He's close, yeah. So he gets to that first finger and he goes down in it. So I switch from being like seated and I go completely prone on my stomach on this finger. And I'm basically, I know when he comes up at that next finger, he's going to be at 20 yards. 20 yards at the most. So when I go prone and I can see like my movement gets his attention, like I can just see his antlers, like he, instead of having his head down, he kind of picked his head up and he was looking around, but all he could see was, all I could see was his antlers above that drainage.
But you think he heard like the leaves rustle or something? Yeah,
because when I moved, he picked his head up. So I get laid completely prone, and he comes up on that next finger and, makes that turn, because it's when he pops up on that next finger, he's facing straight towards me. It's a straight chest shot.
Yeah.
Well, he makes that turn to kind of follow that trail up and around the bowl. And so then he's quartering towards me, and I pull the trigger and realize I hadn't taken the safety off.
Oh.
So then I'm like, oh man. So I, edge back to take the safety off, and I click the safety off. And now I've spent more time close to this deer, and I realize he's not as big as I thought he was originally. He's a little smaller. His rack kind of, it's not quite out past his ears. It's, inside of his ears, right. And his antlers are thin. They're really pretty thin and wispy. He's an 8-point, but they're pretty thin. So then I decide, maybe I'm not going to take this shot. So then I decide, well, I'm going to get my phone out and take a photo. I'm going to take a picture of it. Well, in getting my phone out, I've made enough movement now that he sees something. He knows something's there.
Right.
So he turns straight towards me and is just staring at me, not moving. I mean, he's just standing stoically. He's not stomping or snorting. He's just staring. And I snap a picture or two and am kind of waiting to see what happens now, and kind of getting the itch, like, should I pull the trigger when he, if he turns again or not? And then eventually he gets uncomfortable enough that he's like, I don't want to be here. So he stomps like twice, not very hard, just pretty light stomps. And then he turned and ran off. towards where our dad was hunting. So I was still hoping that Dad might shoot him. But that was basically my story. I would have probably killed him had I taken my safety off.
Yeah.
But after having some more time with the animal to see his size, I decided not to take the shot.
Well, that's cool, though. That's a good story.
Yeah, yeah. I was very impressed that by burping at him that I got him to come in.
I've never heard of that before.
I've heard other people say it, and I kind of, I don't want to say practice it, but when I have to burp,
you practice it.
Right. Yeah, I practice it to see what I can do, and I've gotten pretty good at it to make them sound relatively like a grunt. Yeah, I'd say maybe 75% of the time it sounds something like a grunt.
Well, all I can say is that's special.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I hadn't heard this story yet because I was already on my way home at this point, and so I didn't get to hear the after hunt recap until now, so that's a good story.
Yeah.
So that was our bow weekend. I got my buck for the season, and it was good. It was a good weekend, and we all had fun. We all saw some deer. And now, like Jacob said, we're going to do some more hunting this following weekend. And then it'll probably be, I know Jeff has taken his niece out for youth season. And then we'll be hitting gun season. So it was a good time. Anything else you want to add, Jeff?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, Jacob had to drop off, so he doesn't get any closing thoughts. So, yeah. Hopefully you guys have been having some success. You've been seeing some good rutting activity, and hopefully you enjoyed hearing our stories. So with that, thanks for listening. All right, just a quick wrap up here. That was our weekend. As you heard, there was some interesting stories that came out of it, as always. And just want to thank everybody for listening. Thank you for continuing to support us. You may have heard me tease some things in the past about we've got something in the works. It's still in the works, and I still can't mention what it is, but stay tuned. We'll have an announcement here soon. And as we're getting into the holiday season, if you guys are looking for gift ideas, or maybe your wife or girlfriend or significant other is asking you about, what do you want for Christmas? Maybe consider some Ohio Huntsman gear. We've got our Ohio Huntsman decals. We've got our home and hunt decals and sweatshirts, t-shirts, whatever you like. We've got it at our website, ohiohuntsman.com/apparel. And you can check out what we've got. That also helps support the show and allows us to continue to keep making these episodes. So, like I said, keep it short. Hopefully you're having some success in the woods, and thanks for listening.